Which rib do you like better? Baby backs, St. Louis, or spare ribs? Today we put the myth to bed of which rib cooks different. We're gonna cook all three identical. Let's get started. Okay, now that we have all of our ribs out of the pack, I've got them dried off, and I just wanna elaborate a little bit about what we're doing. So I have never cooked three types of ribs side by side to see the finished temps, to see how they react to the heat together, all of that. Now I have cooked St. Louis and baby backs on the same grill, catering and things like that, but I didn't pay any attention to them. So today I've got a rack of baby back ribs, which comes up off the pork loin. It's cut and it's got a real lean in it. Here on top, you can see it's still some of the pork loin left on here. This is a good meaty baby back rib. This is gonna be your St. Louis style rib, all right? And it is cut from your full spare rib. So this right here is a full spare rib with a brisket bone left on. As you can see when I flip this over, this is what you get in Kansas City and a lot of authentic barbecue places. They cook a full rack of spares here. They want you to get all the flavors. It's got the rib tips on it. It's got everything on it. A St. Louis rack, this has been cut down. I'm gonna lay it up here on top. So when I can take this rib here, you lay it up on top, you see how much has been cut off of here. And actually, us comp guys, I would take this St. Louis rib here and cut a little bit more of that flat meat off on the end, a little bit more of that cartilage. But that's completely up to you. But you can see here, when you take that rib and lay it up here, there's your St. Louis rib compared to your full spare rib. Now, I'm gonna slide this over here. This baby back rib is sitting up here just like this. All right, now, let me move this one out of the way. Well, no, let me put this one back. Here's gonna be a full, the way those ribs are laid in that hog here, okay? This is gonna be right up beside your pork chops, right on your pork loin. You can kind of see where they went down and separated them. This gets filleted out all the way down on top of the belly. So remember, your spare ribs, your St. Louis ribs is laying right on top of that pork belly. That's why sometimes when you get a rack of St. Louis style ribs or spare ribs and they're kind of really thin in nature, well, your processing plants are gonna ensure that they're charging you more for that bacon, so they wanna leave as much possible bacon on those bellies as they can versus the ribs. Those bellies are selling for a little bit more a pound, probably $2 to $3 more a pound than these spare ribs are selling for. So you kind of see why a lot of your processing plants, you wind up with a thin slab of spare ribs or St. Louis style ribs once they're cut out. These baby back ribs always tend to be a little bit meatier. You can see if they were connected the way they're laying up on that hog, when you turn it over, that's all that loin meat right here. Just remember, these St. Louis and these spare ribs come off the top of your pork belly. These come off the top of your pork loin. They all cook a little bit differently. The texture's a little bit differently. I would feel like the St. Louis ribs melt a little bit more in your mouth, being it comes off the top of the pork belly. These right here, you have to really pay attention to how much loin is on your baby backs. They can dry out very quickly. It's a true art to cooking baby back ribs. We pride ourselves here in Memphis that we like to know what we're doing. And I kind of say I have the trophies to back up my knowledge. So it's completely up to you how you cook your ribs. Like I said, I've never done this side by side. Let's get started on some minimal trimming on these ribs. Get them seasoned simply with some of our everyday rub, which is our salt, pepper, and garlic blend, and some of our honey chipotle. We're gonna do all these racks the same, cook them all on our Traeger over Royal Oak charcoal pellets, and see how they turn out. Let's get started. So, the first thing I wanna do to this rack of St. Louis ribs here that I'm gonna start with is I'm gonna come down here and kind of just square it up. Go to my bigger knife here. Any of this flap meat right here, you just want to take, kind of get under it. Anything you can kind of trim off, make that rib more uniform. Now I'm going to take, you got a big knife, you can just take and just square that off right there. Now, once that rib's all the way done like that, that is fine. All I have to do is remove that membrane. We're going to come back and get that in just a second. So for this full rack of spare ribs here, I'm gonna kind of do the same thing. I'm gonna trim this flap back. Now, there's one hard bone right here that you kind of want to take out. I'm gonna come right here on this bone, kind of go right around it there, and just kind of cut it off. Now that's all I'm gonna kind of cut off on that. I'm gonna kind of square this up just a little bit, get any of this loose meat laying off there. And I'm gonna come down here and cut this flap off right here. That's kind of thin. Kind of just square that up. Now, that's a beautiful rack of spare ribs. We still got to get the membrane off of that. But look at that. Now, the only thing I want to do to these ribs, I'm going to knock a little bit of this heavy fat off of one end here. I know all that's not going to render. I think that's going to render just fine. I'm going to leave that spare rib alone. I think St. Louis rib looks good. I'm going to take a little bit of this off. Now I am going to turn this over in this half a bone here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off and square that up. See how that bone was kind of sharp there? We don't want that on there. Now we've got that St. Louis rack kind of looking all perfect. And if I was doing competition, I will say, I would come back and turn this rib and I would go closer to the knuckle and probably cut another solid 3/4 of an inch off of this rib. But this is just a good eating rib at home. I'm not going to trim anything else off of it. Now that leaves us to the infamous baby back rib. Now, we're always talking about skinning ribs, and I will say getting a paper towel or a meat hook or something, a butter knife under these St. Louis ribs to get that membrane off always works a little bit better. But when it comes to these baby back ribs, if you guys would just put on some gloves, take your thumb, start on the high bone end, and literally just go under that membrane, pick it up just like that, and pull it right off. Baby backs are so easy to skin. I will say these little boogers right here, these St. Louis are a little bit harder, like I say, but these baby backs, so easy to remove that membrane. Now, this is a really thick, meaty rib, so I really need to take some of this fat off right here. I really want to even this rib out. You guys have seen plenty of trimming videos that I've done on baby back ribs, but this rib really starts rising about right here. It starts going up. I don't know if you can see it that well on the camera, but I'm going to take and just skim some of that. See that fat right there? Just want to get some of that off. I want to even this rib out. That's all we're trying to do. Light work. I'm gonna go right here and do the same thing. Kind of just even that rib across. Kind of get right under that fat. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. If you've got some fat pockets like this, take your knife and just kind of knock them out real gently, kind of in between the bones, right? I'm going to turn this baby back rib over, and this end bone right here, I'm going to take these two end bones off. They're really thin. There's no meat on them whatsoever, just some cartilage. I'm going to come down here on the end of this baby back, kind of trim that little bit of mess up that was left on there. And I think this rib is fixing to be called a day, and it's going to be ready for some of that seasoning. All right, you see that I'm just taking a paper towel here and just pulling that right off. It does make it a little bit easier on this St. Louis rib to grab a hold of instead of your glove. Now, I take any of this stuff that it pulls up, kind of take my knife and just trim it off. If you've ever got any thick pockets of fat like that on the back of your rib, you can always pick it up like I did that baby back. Watch this. Get that thick fat right off. All you gotta do is curve that bone up. Now that we've got all of our ribs trimmed, our spares look great, our St. Louis look even better, and to me, the star of the show is always gonna be those baby backs. I'm not gonna use any binders today whatsoever. I'm gonna go with my everyday rub, which is salt, pepper, garlic. You know, my garlic jalapeno rub was kind of born off of this rub here, so if you want something with no jalapeno powder in it, be sure to pick you up a bottle of this everyday rub. It's a really good replacer for your salt and pepper in the kitchen. Get down a good base coat of that on all 3 of these ribs, and then I'm gonna come back with my sleeper of the bunch. That's that honey chipotle rub. If I had to go with one barbecue rub all the time to use on anything, it would definitely be this honey chipotle. It's not too hot for people that see the word chipotle and try to think that it's gonna be too hot. And you can say that, chipotle, however you wanna say it, it's completely up to you. Everybody pronounces things differently. I get 500 comments on the internet. We're gonna let these get happy about 5 minutes. I'm gonna come back and repeat the process on the top, and we're gonna get ready to throw them on. All right, I'm gonna let these ribs sweat in another couple minutes, and I'm gonna get them over to the Traeger, and let's do this comparison test and find out how these ribs cook side by side, the time of them, and everything else. We're gonna do it together because I've never done this either. We'll be right back. All right, I've got my grill running at 275 degrees with some roll oak charcoal pellets down here. Let's go ahead. Look at that good smoke bath. First thing I'm gonna do is get these full rack of spare ribs on right here. So I'm gonna go about like that. I'm gonna bunch them up and let's see how they cook. Now I'm gonna go this rack of, put that in the middle. St. Louis ribs on one end, and these mighty, mighty fine looking baby backs in the middle. You can kind of see I've bunched them up. I'm gonna keep the grill shut for at least an hour and 15 minutes before I even raise it to see if they need spritzing, to see what they look like, to see anything. Let's get it shut, and I'm gonna go ahead and top off my pellets in my grill. You know, you can always count on these roll oak charcoal pellets. They're always gonna put off a great smoke flavor, and you don't have to worry about them getting damp or wet. It's kind of a little mist and rain out here today, because with these things being waterproof, it's the ultimate barbecue pellet, if you ask me. All right, it's been an hour and 15 minutes. I have not looked at this grill. Look at these ribs. All 3 of them starting to dry out a little bit on top. We wanna go ahead and get a little bit of water spritzed on. Now, 1 hour in right here, I'm gonna keep letting them go for another hour, and we're gonna come back. At that 1 hour mark, I'm gonna have my thermopen. Let's check the temp and see where all these ribs are. That'll be about 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. We'll be back in an hour. All right, we've been 2 hours and 15 minutes in. Look at the beautiful color on all of these ribs here. Now you can see that rub is starting to stick real good here. None's coming off. And so let's check the temp on these ribs to see where we are on every slab, because everybody's always so confused on ribs. So first off, let's go between the bone. I'm gonna go in it, and it says that spare rib is 164, 165 degrees there, 170. Depends on how far you go through it, right? All right. Let's go in that baby back. We're in that 170 range too. Let's go right in that spare. Climbing up, we're pushing. You can see all of our ribs to me is all within 5 degrees. I mean, just going across this grill. To me, that's not bad. So all of these ribs are cooking about the same. Everybody always freaks out, well, I'm cooking baby backs. The store didn't have St. Louis, or I'm cooking St. Louis, they didn't have baby backs. They're all gonna about cook the same. You don't have to sweat it. That just shows you right there, don't worry about it. It's just a rib. We're not saving the world. We're just trying to make a good eating rib. I'm gonna put my trusty thermopen down. It's time to wrap these ribs up, and I'm gonna treat them all the same. So first thing I'm gonna do, I wanna get my, let's go with these St. Louis ribs here. You see we got some bend on them, some flex. Let's get them over here to the cutting board and wrap them up. Now to keep all these ribs the same, I'm not gonna use butter bath today or anything. I'm gonna try to keep it very simple. I'm gonna use my brown sugar honey habanero glaze. This is perfectly fine to wrap with too. You can even add it to your butter bath if you want. I'm gonna put a little line down here though. I'm gonna put those meat side down, and I'm gonna go a little bit on the back side, not much at all. Remember, we're just adding a little bit for flavor, not much at all. Now, those St. Louis's are wrapped back up. Let's get them on the grill, and I'm gonna grab the baby backs next. Now, you see we got that nice flop, what we're looking for here, about halfway down on the tongs. Let's get it over to the grill, repeat the process, wrap it up in that brown sugar honey habanero. That is a pretty color on that rib. And might I add, the smell is mighty fine too. All right, these baby backs are wrapped. Time to grab the spare ribs. Looks like we got some flop on those spare ribs too. Look at those striations there. Starting to bend that rib so big, let's get it over the cutting board. I'm gonna take, I feel like that wrap there needs a little bit more. Just to ensure that I cover that up all the way. Now, let's get these spare ribs back on the grill. I'm gonna set the timer for 1 hour and see where we're at. So being I'm cooking at 275, I said 1 hour. I'm gonna set a timer for 1 hour, check it and see where it's at, but I can almost bet these ribs are gonna have to go between 1 hour and 15 minutes to 1.5 hours before they're tender all the way. So let's set our timer and come back in 1 hour and see where we're at. All right, our ribs have been wrapped 1 hour and 15 minutes. I'm gonna get back over here to the grill. Let's get in here and look at this. I'm gonna say that rib might be okay by looking at it. I'm gonna go right in between the bones. And we're going up 203, 204, 205. I'm gonna say that rib is done. I'm gonna wrap it back up. Now that's your full spare rib. There's your full spare rib. Let's go in your baby back here. All right, let's talk about that bone here. Remember on the big end, those bones are starting to pop through. Push-pull test, look at that, starting to come through. I bet that rib right there is about 205. Well, let's just say between 203, 208. I'd say that big thick baby back is done too. So it's gonna be done. Now, I'm pretty sure this St. Louis rib's gonna be done. That bone's wanting to pop through there. That one is too. I'm gonna go ahead and get my thermal pen, take a look at it. Yeah, we're fine. As you can see, all of these ribs finished about the same time. Total cook time, 3 hours, 45 minutes. I mean, I like a 4-hour rib is what I like to say. So I'm gonna get these off, let them rest on the counter about 20 to 30 minutes, let them cool down. I'm gonna take them out, sauce them up with just my competition barbecue sauce, get them back on the pit and let them glaze over. We're gonna have some good eating ribs 3 different ways. All right, we wanna treat all these ribs the same as we've done this whole video. So I'm gonna take these ribs out. Still want them. Look at that rib. Look at the color. Look at all that. That is incredible, y'all. I'm gonna take and throw a little bit of our competition style barbecue sauce on this rib. I wanna glaze up all 3 of these slabs and kind of return them to the cooker. Look at that, straight out of the wrap. Look at that color. That is what you're looking for. Rib man approved. Get a little sauce down the back here. These ribs smell incredible. Woo! Woo-wee. Tell you that honey chipotle is hard. Honey chipotle, however you want to pronounce it, is on point today. All right, as you can see, we've got all 3 racks of our ribs here done up. You can look at the color, looks great on each of these ribs. They all cook the same, no matter whether you cook St. Louis ribs, baby backs, or full spare ribs. We only done minimal trimming just to get a little bit of those end bones off of these spare ribs. I'm gonna get all 3 slabs back on my Traeger for about 15 minutes to get tacked up and let this glaze set. And then we're gonna get to cut into these ribs, and let me show you the bites and the bone pull off of each one of these. And so if you're ever worried about a rib cooking differently than another type of rib, we're putting all that to bed today. The myths are debunked. They all cook the same. They all create a flavorful rib. Let's get them back over to the cooker and tack them up. All of those ribs look great. Let's get the grill lid shut, let them get tacked up. You know, a lot of people are really scared of ribs because of what they cost. They don't want to ruin them to cook. If you're scared of an offset cooker or anything like that, I highly recommend. There's so many different great pellet grills out there now. Traeger is not the only one. Rectech makes good grills as well. Yoder is American made. It all depends on what you want. But please don't knock a pellet grill. They produce great products at the end of the day with very, very limited knowledge of how to run a grill. And so for anybody scared of just wanting to make great barbecue, check out any of the pellet grills out there. Pretty much the majority of them put out great products. This Traeger Ironwood is one of the top-notch ones in my opinion. All right, as you can see, it's been about 15 minutes. Our ribs are nice, mahogany, tacked up, color beautiful on them. Let's get them over to our cutting board, cut them up, and give each one a try. See how the tenderness is on each one once they've been rested, sauced, and glazed. Okay, the biggest thing here, you can see the physical appearance of each one of these ribs are a little bit different. You can kind of see where I took my knife and kind of dug those divots out of those fat pockets on this baby back rib here. You can see how we squared up that St. Louis rib down here, how we just cut that one brisket bone off and kind of curved this full set of spare ribs. We used our everyday rub as a base layer, no binder whatsoever. We come back with a good medium to heavy coat of our honey chipotle rub, put it all over it, put it on our Traeger. They went 2 hours and 15 minutes. Now, we didn't spritz them but one time at about 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then we pulled them off, wrapped them in just some of our brown sugar honey habanero to keep everything consistent. And so, turned around after that, just glazed them with our sweet sauce, put them back on the grill 15 minutes. These ribs had a total cook time of 4 hours, 3 hours and 45 minutes between the smoke and the foil. I'm gonna cut a section out of each one of these ribs, take a bite of each one, and show you the kind of the texture and the pull of each one of these ribs. So let's get in here and make sure I'm going in between these bones on this baby back. All right, there's me a baby back rib. There's that St. Louis rib. Now, right there is the full spare rib. It's got the rib tip attached to it. See all the moisture in that? You can see the moisture in that rib too. It's got a little bit of the rib tip on it, but not much. And then that baby back rib there, look at that. You can see how that loin meat's left on top. And I'm just gonna tear, that's part of the loin right there. It has a totally different texture to it, everything. That's gonna pull different and all. Wrapping that rib face down, it makes that bark just so moist and flavorful from all the layers of flavor that we put on that. Perfect bite. Hard to beat a baby back rib in my book. Full bite through on top of that, which is great. Now, let's go in here and get a bite of this spare rib. I'm probably wearing this all over my face. But I will tell you, the texture is a little bit different on top of the St. Louis and the spare rib compared to the baby back. The baby back seemed like it got a little bit softer of a bark. It's not as hard of a chew, where this on top of the spare ribs and the St. Louis, it seems like the strands just, if you've cooked a lot of pork belly, you'll understand what I'm saying. The texture is just a little bit different. And so, as it should be, because that baby back comes up near the loin and this on top of the pork belly. No matter which one of these ribs you choose to cook at your next backyard party or cookout or just for your family, you can't go wrong with any of them whatsoever. Remember, all these recipes are really easy to do on the pellet grill. It can be translated over to an offset grill, a Weber, any kind of grill you have. You can cook these ribs just like that. Your fire management's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be the only thing. Remember, whatever rib you decide to go with, you can't go wrong, especially when it's seasoned up with some good dry rub. And there's a lot of people out there that make a lot of great flavors. Dance around and try them all. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, and of course, YouTube. I'll see you next week with another video.